Men often find themselves blindsided by a culture that hates authentic masculinity, and many have given in and succumbed to the ever-evolving culture and woke society. But not us. We are the ReMENant, faithful Catholic men from 3 different generations who reach through the radio to tackle current events that challenge our wills and empower the practice of the Catholic faith through thought-provoking discernment and prayer. So, if you're feeling overwhelmed and bombarded, it's time to turn your radio up and join us for The ReMENant on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The ReMENant here on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network. I'm Bill Snyder, and I want to remind you that The ReMENant show is sponsored by the Fraternity of St. Joseph's Men's Group, and they do encourage you to start a chapter in your own parish. And so simply visit fsjjourneyman.com for more information about how you can start that chapter. I'm joined by Ray Haywood and Stephen Thomas, like I am every single week. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I'm excited to be chatting with you today about the masculine journey. How are you, Ray?
Wonderful. Thank you for this time and fellowship. We get to do this, fellas. So the topic for our show today is the masculine journey, and placement of the masculine journey in episode 6 shows the importance of the awareness of this theory and how it plays true for an intentional journeyman. Me personally, I was not made aware of the theory of the masculine journey until I was in my 40s. My sons and I are now much better off with the knowledge that it shares. Here is my own interpretation of the 6 stages of the masculine journey. The first stage is exploration. The second is self-identity. The third is self-worth. The fourth is the awakening stage. The 5th stage is head of household, followed by the 6th stage, which is the elder stage. So I'm going to expand on each of these just a little bit more to encourage further discernment for the intentional journeyman out there who's listening along. So in the first stage, the childhood exploration stage, this is important for the father to share with the mother the dangers of pushing down the heart of the boy. And there is very much truth in the saying of allowing boys to be boys. This is very real. In the second stage, the adolescent self-identity stage, adolescent moments are going to happen. If not approached well, these moments of confusion can leave scars on the whole family. No matter where the father is in his own struggle within his own masculine journey, this stage needs his compassionate selflessness for the young family to navigate well the adolescent moments they will all inevitably face. The third stage, the young adult self-worth stage. We find what we feel is worth fighting for in this stage. We are losing many young men to the worldly causes that become the truth for them in the young adult self-worth stage, as they move towards living in and of the world and away from living in and of the word. The worldly narrative of no consequences for their actions removes all authority and leaves chaos in the void of order. The intentional, compassionate, loving father needs to continually chip away at sharing truth as he fights through the feeling of not being heard. Man, this is something that many men my age feel. It's constant in the conversations I have with other men. And I say to them what my grandmother said to me when I was a young man. My grandmother used to say, Raymond, you don't have to listen to me, but you are going to have to hear me. There is wisdom beyond words shared in her statement. In the 4th stage, the adult awakening stage, if we have lived well through the 3 prior stages, we can now turn back to our fathers and start to hear as well as listen to the wisdom that only life lessons can share. Growth in character is very much a part of the adult awakening stage. The fifth stage, the midlife, head of household stage. Order placed into the family in the form of obedience and discipline provides this leading place of honor for the intentional paternal father. I want to stress that our spiritual fathers need to be aware that no matter where they are in their own personal masculine journey, head of household is their God-given placement for them in their faith community. In the sixth stage, the senior, elder stage, is where our children are now grown and out of the house. Many men in this stage start to look back on past experiences in humility, and if they didn't invest in their family's spiritual growth, find that life may have gotten away from them in more than a few times. Knowledge of this stage in the masculine journey helps the intentional spiritual and paternal father to set their family's trajectory. So my takeaway would be that understanding and knowing well the place we hold and the thresholds within the masculine journey help us as men to find, through humility, the obedience and discipline needed to form our guiding principles. One point I would like to emphasize is that as men, we should always be leading and following other men of goodwill as we successfully help each other move through the masculine journey. What do you think about that, Stephen?
Oh, that's great stuff, and I'll try to piggyback off that best I can with my own perspective. And I think as a young person, particularly, a lot of my perspective has been shaped by observing and reacting to the what I would essentially call the crisis of masculinity on the world stage today. Now, Ray, you said that the worldly narrative is of no consequence for men's actions, and it removes all authority, and it leaves chaos in the void of order. And to go along with that, I think I'd say that the world today has gone so far as to remove one of the essential components needed for the development of proper masculinity. And I think that that's adversity. And I think particularly for the church, in order for it to live on, it must be strengthened by the presence of masculine men, both priest and layperson, men who know themselves and fight against the baser temptations which the world throws at us. And I'll try to unpack this a little bit. So according to St. Thomas Aquinas, who gave us this concept of effeminacy, which is defined as an unwillingness to put aside one's pleasure in order to pursue what is arduous. This is also the definition of sloth, but there's a difference here in that sloth is the aversion of what's hard, whereas effeminacy is a disordered or an inordinate attachment to pleasure. Now, we live today in a world of instant gratification, particularly in America and in the West, where comparatively we live in more material abundance than any other nation in all of history. We have smartphones, which are an innately addictive technology, which can give us a myriad of instant fulfillments. I can order Chick-fil-A on an app. I can watch TV or whatever. I communicate with my friends instantly whenever I want. Or, I don't personally do this, but you can inflate your ego by posting on social media and getting likes. And the list goes on. And society is always throwing things at us that are pleasurable in that way. And it's difficult for men, especially because we're the more physical and visual of the two sexes. And I think this is in part why so many young men today struggle with pornography, because it's so easy to access anonymously on the phone. And it's easy to keep that secret. It's one of the greatest, I think, silent killers of masculinity, because it robs men of being, in effect, able to love a real woman in the flesh. So what can we do? With the vice of effeminacy, the solution is to discern the virtue that is opposite it and develop it so as to counteract the baseness of that vice. With effeminacy, the countering virtue is magnanimity, a Latin word that means greatness of soul. You may have heard the phrase, take something away from a man that constantly gives him pleasure and see what his response is. To know what we need to do, we need only look to Christ, the quintessential example of magnanimity. He took up the cross and in the perfect sacrifice aligned his will to the Father's will so that the redemption of mankind might be complete. I in part believe this is a key reason Christ was born a man, because men were born for self-sacrifice for the sake of others. For our friends, our families, and all those we love, it is in this where we find meaning. And Bill, I'll pass it off to you with that.
Yeah, it's so many great insights from you both. And I really like how you both really laid out how the masculine journey is important to intentionally follow and intentionally understand where you are along the journey. And the reason why I say that is because oftentimes we hear this phrase in our faith. I think it's way too cliche and way too overused, but we often hear we are all on a journey, right? We hear different people use that. I've heard homilists use that. I've heard priests and homilies use that. But I hope that tonight you've been able to pause and think, right? Where are you? You see, our culture, as Stephen kind of mentioned, wants us to drift aimlessly through life. And Satan's number one goal is to keep you distracted from the mission of fulfilling God's will in your life. So what does he do? As Stephen said, he puts all of these different distractions in there and stumbling blocks, from smartphones to pornography to all of these different ways that, Satan, and it doesn't have to be very big. Like, he can just put something above God in your life. That's so easy for him to do. Oh, it's more important that I watch Monday Night Football than do something else with my time. It's more important that I do this than, be a loving father and take care of my family. And all we have to do is raise one idol above God, and Satan ends up winning the battle. Now, he doesn't win the war, because what's so very important is that when we are intentional, and we say, where are we on this path? Where are we along the masculine journey? And we say, okay, I am going to reclaim this. We start winning battles, and we ultimately win the war. So there's a few things that you need to think about in all that Ray and Stephen presented. Where are you? Are you walking around aimlessly? And what is your purpose in life, right? What is your personal mission that the Holy Spirit is putting on your heart to call you to do? Vocationally, right? Maybe husband, father, priest, but also career-wise. What are you called to do? Career, what has God given you? What is the gift that God has given you? And two other questions, which we'll revisit in our ReMENant challenge, but I want you to think about, who are your mentors and who are you mentoring? Because that's so important, right? Like, as Ray talks about this, folks, he talks about it as going through these different stages, right? Well, here's the important thing. We need somebody to guide us to the next stage, and we also need to be guiding somebody into that next stage. So, how do we do that? And we have to understand that as mentors and mentorees. Who are you mentoring? And who is mentoring you? So think about those things. We've got to take a short break here on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network. This is The Remnant. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hello, my name is Ray Haywood, and I'm coming to you today to speak to you about the Fraternity of St. Joseph Men's Group, a men's group that was started under the leadership of Father Matthew Card by the intentional men of the parish of St. Thomas Aquinas here in our Diocese of Charlotte, North Carolina. In our first efforts, we were asked if we would model our men's group in a way that other parishes could simply follow. With that intent in mind, we created the FSJJourneyman.com website. On that website, you can find all that is needed to create your own chapter of the Fraternity of St. Joseph Men's Group in your parish, as well as resource documents that we are intentionally placing into our faith community. We hope that you will step closer to the path and to each other in the just model of St. Joseph as you consider creating your own chapter of the Fraternity of St. Joseph Men's Group.
How's it going, Remnant listeners? This is your co-host, Stephen Thomas. Like you and all discerning men, I am often intrigued and provoked by what I see and what I hear about in the world today, and I wonder whether or not I can reconcile it to our Catholic faith. And my apostolate primarily is that of the Catholic school teacher, but I also write essays and reflections on topics that I believe are either noteworthy or important to the Catholic world today. My work can be found at Musings of a Young Mind. Just search it or put Musings of a Young Mind works.wordpress.com in your search bar. Thank you, and hail Christ the King. God bless.
Today, many students go to college with numerous questions about their faith, yearning to know if the seed planted in them as a child is both true and practical. Using the miracle on the road to Emmaus as a model, young adult ministers conversed weekly for 3 months with college students about the most pressing questions they had about the Catholic faith. As they journeyed together virtually, something amazing happened. Doubts disappeared, fears faded, and Jesus revealed that He is still alive. Hearts Burning Within Us, the latest book from Patchwork Heart Ministry, is a result of that grace-infused conversation. It is the perfect back-to-school gift for recent high school graduates and current college students. Get your copy for them today at patchworkheart.org or by calling 424-704-3278. That's 424-704-3278.
Welcome back to The Remnant on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network.
Welcome back to the Remnant. Today's saint of the day is Saint Peter. Just as the masculine journey was placed well here in episode 6, so is the importance of Saint Peter. Saint Peter was shown humility as a young man in his 3-time denial of Jesus. Jesus knew this denial was necessary for Peter to be brought to humility by his questioning of Peter in John 21:15 through 19. Peter, do you love me? Times 3. We all know the verse. In Jesus' measured out lesson of fatherly love, Peter is brought to remorse, and is humbled, and is now readied for the task ahead of leading our all-enduring, everlasting church in like humility. Beautiful, no? What do you think, Stephen?
That's good stuff. And I'm going to piggyback again off of what you said, at the risk of sounding like a cliche. So the denial of Peter, I think in a way is effeminate. I think it's a good fit for our theme because it gives us a real life example to look at, I think, of what the human condition is like. And so he's confronted outside the temple and he denies Christ. He's running away from the adversity of, owning up to who he is and dealing with his accusers. And in that moment, he drops the cross of being a follower of Christ. And in this way, I think he's an archetype for how our own relationship to Christ can sometimes be. None of us is ever perfect. And yet, our past sins and our flaws can't stop us from future greatness in the form of magnanimity. Peter in Latin is Petrus, which is why Christ picked that ultimately. That means the rock. Christ chose Peter as his rock, the first pontiff, the first head of our church, even though he knew Peter would deny him. Peter went on to embrace the cross in a very literal sense at his own martyrdom in the Colosseum a few decades after Christ died and resurrected and ascended into heaven. So we know the story probably of Peter being crucified upside down, I believe, under the persecutions during the reign of Emperor Nero. In the denial of the easy way out, through the tribulation of his suffering and death, Peter won heaven and it now holds its keys. Bill, what's your thoughts on St. Peter?
Yeah, I love St. Peter because I feel like he gives, as you mentioned, so much hope to the average guy. I mean, Jesus never defines what kind of rock Peter is. I think he's like shale, right? It's like that thin, flaky rock. And the reason why I say that is because you look at Peter as a person. He confesses Jesus as the Messiah, right? In Matthew chapter 16, he says, "Hey, Jesus, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God," right? And then, like, I don't know, 6 verses later, Jesus then turns to him and says, "Get behind me, Satan, because you can't die and be put to death. That's not how this works." And so here we are. You just see this like complete flip flop within this many verses. You also have the great story of the walking on the water, right? Here Peter is in all his holy boldness. "If that's really you, Jesus, come on, have me come out to you on the water." Jesus replies with one word. He says, "Come." And Peter steps out, maybe like 2-3 steps, and he looks around and he goes, "This is a little too much," and he starts to sink. And so for me, St. Peter gives me incredible hope, as you kind of mentioned, Stephen, because this is a guy that we can follow. But yet, what did Jesus do? He said, "This is the guy that's going to be the foundation of my church." And so I think for us, if we feel like that piece of shale, like that brittle shale rock that's out there, guys, you just feel like you're being trampled on, or you're weak in your faith, use St. Peter as the guide, because Jesus chose you for this particular mission in life. He chose you to lead your family, or if you're a priest or a religious brother, lead your parish or your ministry, right? And that's what he did. And St. Peter also serves as a reminder, as Ray kind of highlighted in there, about how Ray said that that humility and putting your weakness in the heart of Christ, right? Saying in that remorseful, humbled way, "Here are my weaknesses, Jesus. Take them, transform them." And Christ always transforms that. He always takes that humble heart and he transforms it. So for me, I just see somebody who I relate to an absolute ton, because I feel like shale a lot, right? I feel like shale rock an awful lot. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Ray, for the ReMENant challenge.
Okay, so my ReMENant challenge was very simple for me today. It's that as older men, we share the need for humility with our younger brothers. For me, I didn't share in humility until I was in my late 40s. Can you imagine? Oh, man, I spent a lot of time as an adolescent Catholic. St. Peter had the loving guidance of Jesus to bring him to humility. Now, for our younger brothers, this world leaves no room for humility for our younger brothers amongst all of the chaos challenging them in their physical lives gathering stage. I hope everybody understands what the gathering stage is for a younger man. He's trying to carve his way out in his physical world, and his spiritual world is just not in sight when he's young. So to my peers listening in, let's be intentional in sharing the example of the humility Jesus showed to St. Peter in his 3-time denial as a perfect example for them to grow from. If we are taught how to move through the masculine journey well, in our formative years, we will understand the need for humility throughout all the stages of the masculine journey. For me, before we can intentionally lead, we must first humbly follow. And as I always say, we can't do this journey alone. So, Stephen, what's your ReMENant?
So I'm kind of sticking with what I mentioned before about the story of Peter and effeminacy versus magnanimity. And I'm also going to be quoting from Matthew 16. We're given the formula for masculinity, I think, in the 24th through 26th verses of Matthew 16, which reads, "Then Jesus told his disciples, 'If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul?'" So my challenge this week is, at the end of the day, I want you to reflect upon that scripture verse and examine your own life for ways in which you can root out effeminacy and better practice magnanimity in its place. I'm sure Bill's got a great challenge for you as well.
Yeah, let me jump in here with that. And folks, it was kind of along the same lines as what I spoke about earlier. And that is simply that we should always be mentoring somebody and being mentored by somebody. I do even think St. Peter had that in his life. Like, there was Jesus, and he knew that person, and he was mentored by Christ early on, right? In his life and his ministry. Obviously, all the apostles were. But Peter took that to the next level when he became Pope and began to mentor and lead the church forward. So it's the same thing with us. We need to always have that person that is leading us and one that we are always leading. And so if you haven't already intentionally thought about that, and you are following somebody and also leading someone in the faith, then this week actively think about that. Actively seek those people out and establish those relationships now, right? It's very simple. Call up somebody. I've called up people in my life and said, you know what? I appreciate you as a mentor in the faith. I appreciate you as a person who is guiding me. And then I've also turned to other people and said, listen, I hope that I can bring you something. I hope that I can help lead you deeper in your faith intentionally, right? And the church has roles for this within our sacramental process. We have confirmation sponsors. We have also, godparents, right? Where we solidify these roles as leading others. And then what do we hope to do? Have those people lead others. So this is about the chain of witnesses. This is about handing on the faith. Again, we don't have to be perfect. We know St. Peter wasn't. But follow somebody and also lead somebody along the masculine journey. It's the only way we're all going to be able to, reach our destination that we want to reach, which is heaven. So that's what I have for you guys today. That's what we have for you today on The ReMENant. I hope that you will engage with us on social media. Follow us, friend us, like us. Simply search for The ReMENant, spelled ReMenant, because this is all about challenging men to live the gospel. So we hope that you will follow, friend, and like us on all of that. And we thank you for joining us here on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network. Until next time, may God bless you and your family.
Thank you for joining The ReMENant today. For more information about us, email theremnantshow@gmail.com. That's the ReMenant show@gmail.com.